Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Barry Allen never liked getting tangled up in Gotham City's Sun affair. It was dark, gloomy, and filled with shadows that danced as if they had minds of their own. Central City, his city, was nothing like this. Sure, they had their fair share of problems, but there was light both literally and metaphorically. Gotham, on the other hand, felt suffocating, like every corner was hiding something sinister. And tonight was no different. As the Flash Barry zipped through the dark alleys, his red suit standing out like a flame in the blackness. The reason he was here, though, was bigger than a local problem. People, dozens of them, had gone missing. No signs of a struggle, no ransom demands, just vanished. And the common link between them all, they'd have been seen near a mysterious high-tech lab on the edge of both Gotham and Central City's jurisdiction. That was where he was headed now. As he reached the lab, sad skirts, he saw him, Batman, standing atop the building, its roof, cape billowing in the wind. Batman was watching the same facility. Barry felt a flicker of irritation. It wasn't that he didn't respect the man. On the contrary, Batman was probably the most focused and intelligent hero he'd ever met, but their methods completely opposite. Barry vibrated his molecules, phasing through the side of the building and into the laboratory. Everything was pristine, cold, and sterile, the kind of place where you check things to be meticulously calculated and nothing left to chance. Barry's instinct told him something was off, but before he could act on it, he heard the whoosh of Batman's set cape as the Dark Knight entered through a window, dropping to the ground silently. Sailor Batman's gruff voice warned, "This place has a bad feeling." Barry rolled his eyes, though Batman couldn't see it. "You think," he said, zooming around the room at lightning speed, searching for any sign of trouble. Just as he was about to report back that it was all clear, the lights flickered. That's when it hit them both, a surge of electricity, like being caught in the center of a lightning storm. The walls warped around them, bending, twisting. The sterile lab was disappearing, and in its place, a dark void stretched into eternity. Barry groaned, clutching his head as he tried to regain his bearing. Batman was already on his feet, pulling out his gadgets, scanning the environment. "Where are we?" Flash asked, shaking his head to clear the dizziness. Batman's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the lab. It's a simulation." Before they could make sense of it, the void shifted, morphing into something far too familiar. Barry blinked, recognizing the streets of Central City, but something was wrong. The buildings were twisted, their structures bending unnaturally like a nightmare version of the city he knew. Batman, meanwhile, found himself in the familiar but warped streets of Gotham. The towering skyscrapers were cast in eerie shades of gray, their shadows longer and darker than reality would allow. A deep, chilling wind howled through the streets, carrying with it faint whispers that made the hair on his neck stand up. "This isn't real," Batman muttered to himself, instinctively activating his scanner. But no readings came back. The equipment was useless here, wherever here was. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the air, seemingly coming from all around them. "Welcome, gentlemen. The voice taunted you and been brought here to face the truth." "Who the hell is that?" Flash demanded, spinning around to locate the source. That, Batman growled, is Dr. Victor Nexon. The name sent a chill down Barry's spine. He'd heard of Nexon, a rogue scientist, obsessed with virtual reality and the human psyche. Nexon had disappeared years ago, presumed dead, but clearly he'd been working on something far more sinister. Batman's jaw clenched. He's been experimenting with virtual worlds for years. He must have perfected a way to trap us inside. Barry's heart raced. "You were saying we were stuck in a video game?" "In a sense, yes," Batman replied, his voice low, "and this game isn't going to play fair." Before either of them could strategize, the ground beneath them trembled. The virtual city around them shifted, and in an instant, Flash found himself standing alone in the heart of Central City, surrounded by twisted versions of his friends and family. Barry's breath hitched in his throat, his mother alive, standing before him, smiling. But the smile twisted into something grotesque as the image of his mother melted away, replaced by the figure of Reverse Flash, his longtime nemesis. "You'll never be fast enough, Barry." Reverse Flash sneered, his eyes glowing with malevolence. "You couldn't save her. You can save anyone." Barry clenched his fists, his legs twitching with the urge to run to escape the accusations swirling in his head. Memories of his mother's sudden death flooded his mind, the guilt and regret stabbing him like a knife. He couldn't try and outrun the past, no matter how fast he was. Meanwhile, Batman found himself in the dark alleys of Gotham, his worst nightmare playing out before him. Criminals ran rampant, fires blazing through the streets, and then he saw his parents walking down that fateful alley once again. He tried to stop them, to yell, but his voice wouldn't tell it come out. Then the gunshot, the flash of metal, his mother's sag pearls, scattering on the cold, wet pavement. Batman fell to his knees, fists pounding the ground in frustration. He had seen this scene so many times in his dreams, but this time it felt too real. Too raw, his failures haunted him like a specter, whispering that no matter what he did, Gotham would always be lost. For what felt like hours, both heroes were trapped in their personal hells, reliving their deepest fears and regret. But something changed as the simulation pushed them to their emotional limits. Their experiences began to merge. Barry could feel Bruce's pain, his frustration and sorrow. Likewise, Bruce could sense Barry's overwhelming guilt, his constant struggle to be faster, better, more. In that moment, they realized the truth: this simulation wasn't just designed to trap them physically. It was feeding off their emotions, their fears, making the world stronger with every passing second. "We have to break this," Flash muttered to himself, forcing his eyes to look away from the twisted version of his mother. His powers, he still had them. Maybe they didn't work like they should, but they were there. With a deep breath, Flash focused, pulling all his energy into his leg. He was the fastest man alive. Nothing could hold him back, not even a fake reality. He took off running faster than he'd ever run before, the world around him blurring into nothingness. At the same time, Batman regained control. He forced himself to stand, to turn away from the nightmare replaying in front of him. Logic, reason, those were his weapons. He knew this wasn't too real. It was all a mind game. He had to find Flash together. They could break free. As Flash ran, the world around him began to crack, fissures spreading through the twisted streets of Central City. The more he ran, the more the simulation faltered, pieces of it crumbling like shattered glass. He could feel Batman, now his presence just out of reach. Suddenly, the two heroes collided, the world around them disintegrating into a dark void once again. Batman Flash gasped, his chest heaving from the exertion. "We need to work together. This thing, it's feeding off our emotions. The more we fight it alone, the stronger it gets." Batman nodded grimly, agreed. "We have to confront it head on." But before they could plan their next move, the void shifted again. Dr. Nexon appeared before them, a shadowy figure looming over them with a twisted smile. "You think you've figured it out," he sneered. "This world isn't just a trap. It's a reflection of you, your flaws, your fears. You can't escape unless you confront them." Barry glanced at Batman, worry flickering in his eyes. "We've already faced them. We've just seen what this place is doing." Nexon's smile widened. "You've only scratched the surface. There's more, so much more." With a wave of Nexon's hand, the ground beneath them rippled like water, and the world shifted once more. This time, they were standing in front of mirror versions of themselves, dark, twisted reflections that seemed to pulse with the malevolent energy. The dark Batman stepped forward, his eyes cold and empty, the bat symbol on his chest warped and jagged. His voice was low and menacing. "You are weak, Bruce. You think you can save Gotham by holding back. You are afraid to do what's necessary." The dark Flash appeared next to him, a blur of red lightning sparking around him. His smile was cruel, his eyes filled with chaos. "You too slow. Barry, always will be. You can save anyone." Both heroes tensed, their hearts pounding in their chests. "This isn't too real," Batman growled, his fists clenching. "The Regis projection." Nexon's laughter echoed around them. "Perhaps, but you can defeat them unless you accept the truth about yourself." The dark Batman lunged, and Batman barely had time to react, blocking the attack with a swift movement. But the force behind it was overwhelming, knocking him back. This dark version of himself wasn't just a projection. It was everything he feared he could become. Flash, too, was forced into action, dodging a blur of attacks from his darker self. The speed was dizzying, faster than he'd ever moved before. Batman staggered back from the force of his darker self's attack, feeling the weight of every punch. This wasn't just a fight. It was a confrontation with the very thing he had spent his life avoiding, becoming the very monster he fought against. The dark Batman moved with calculated brutality, each strike colder than the last, driven by a merciless instinct that Batman feared lurked within himself. "Stop holding back." The dark reflection snarled, throwing another punch that Batman barely dodged. You think you resaving Gotham by playing by the rules, by sparing lives that don't deserve it. You re-afraid, Bruce, afraid of what you will become if you go too far. Batman's breath came in, shallow gasps. He knew this was next an endgame, exploiting his fear. But the truth behind the words was undeniable. He had always lived on the edge, one step away from crossing the line. His own morality, the only thing separating him from the criminals he fought, felt fragile in this twisted world. Across the battlefield, Flash struggled against his own dark version. The Dark Flash moved like lightning, each step leaving an arc of crackling energy in his wake. Barry pushed himself harder, faster, but it wasn't tight enough. Every move he made, his darker self was already ahead of him. You will never be fast enough. The Dark Flash taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. No matter how hard you try, you will always fail the ones you love. You can try outrun guilt, Barry. It'll catch up to you just like it did with your mother. Barry's heart pounded in his chest, the words hitting him harder than any punch could. His mother, South's, his biggest failure. That's one thing he couldn't change no matter how fast he ran, no matter how many times he tried to save others. The guilt had always been there, lingering at the edges of his mind. And now it was being thrown in his face by this darker, twisted version of himself. The Dark Flash blurred forward, landing a punch to Barry's gut that sent him sprawling across the ground. The impact left him gasping for air, his mind racing. He had to be faster. He had to push beyond his limit. But the more he tried, the more the world around him seemed to collapse, bending under the weight of his fear. Batman was locked in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle with his darker self. The punches landed like sledgehammers, and each blow was filled with the malice and cruelty Batman feared he was capable of. His own techniques, the years of training, seemed to have no effect. It was like fighting a shadow one that knew his every move, his every thought. You read not strong enough. The Dark Batman growled, locking Batman in a chokehold. You've spent your life pretending you read above them, but deep down you read just like the criminals you hunt. Batman's vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. The words were designed to break him, to wear him down mentally as much as physically. He couldn't let that happen, not here, not now. With a surge of strength, Batman broke free of the hold, rolling away and reaching for one of his gadgets. His utility belt still worked in this virtual world, and he pulled out a smoke bomb, hurling it at his darker self. The cloud exploded between them, giving Batman a momentary reprieve. But the Dark Batman's voice cut through the haze. You can hide from me, Bruce. I am you. Flash, still trying to catch his breath, saw the Dark Flash looming over him. His darker self crackled with energy, red lightning flashing around his body. The look in his eyes was pure madness, a reflection of everything Barry feared he could become if he lost control of his power. You think you can save everyone down to you? The Dark Flash sneered. That if you run fast enough, you can outrun your mistakes, but you wrong. Every time you try, someone dies, and it's your fault. The words stung, cutting deep into Barry's soul. His failures flashed before his eyes, his mother, Iris, the countless people he couldn't try safe in time. But this was Nexon's trick, exploiting his deepest fears, turning his self-doubt into a weapon. You had to push past it. This wasn't true about speed. It was about something else, something deeper. He couldn't just run from the truth, not anymore. Barry forced himself to stand, his legs shaky but determined. I know I can save everyone, he said, his voice steady despite the pain, but that's not going to stop me from trying. With a burst of speed, he launched himself at the Dark Flash, not running away but running toward the fear. As their bodies collided, the energy between them crackled violently, the red lightning mixing with Barry, Hess' own yellow aura. Meanwhile, Batman circled his darker self, his mind racing to find a weakness. The Dark Batman was a reflection of everything he feared, ruthless, cold, calculated. But he wasn't her real. This was Nexon's creation, a mirror designed to trap him in his own insecurity. I'm not you, Batman said, his voice low and controlled. I never was, and I never will be. The Dark Batman lunged, but this time, Batman was ready. He sidestepped the attack, delivering a precise blow to his darker self's chest, knocking him off balance. Batman followed up with a series of rapid strikes, each one aimed at weak points he knew only too well. The Dark Batman stumbled, and for the first time, Batman saw the flicker of doubt in his eye. That was it. The truth, this dark reflection, wasn't as stronger than him. It was only as strong as he allowed it to be. Across the battlefield, Barry was locked in a race against his darker self, their speeds blurring the edges of reality. But as he pushed harder, he realized something. This wasn't about being faster. It was about accepting that he wasn't perfect, that he couldn't always win, and that was okay. As that realization hit, Barry felt a shift. The red lightning around the dark flash flickered and dimmed. The two speedsters collided one final time, but this time, Barry was in control. The impact sent shockwaves through the air, and the dark flash crumbled into nothingness. At the same moment, Batman landed the final blow on his darker self, sending him crashing to the ground. The dark Batman tried to rise, but his strength was fading, his form flickering like a dying flame. With one last look, he disappeared, leaving Batman standing victorious. The virtual world around them began to shake, the ground cracking and the sky darkening. Nexensal's voice boomed from above, filled with rage. "You think you've won? This was just a test. You can't escape." Flash and Batman exchanged a glance, their breaths still heavy from the battle. Now they knew the truth. Now they weren't trapped by Nexen. They had been trapped by their own fears, and now they were free. Together, they ran toward the crumbling horizon, their movements in perfect sync. Flash, Thede, and Batman, at precision, worked in harmony, and as they reached the edge of the virtual world, a bright light engulfed them. When they opened their eyes, they were back in the real world. The lab was quiet, the machines around them powered down. Dr. Nexen was lying unconscious on the floor, his virtual reality equipment destroyed. Batman walked over to Nexen, checking his pulse before binding him with a quick motion. Sent over. Barry nodded, though the weight of what they had just been through still hung in the air. The experience had been more than just a fight. It had been a journey through their deepest fears and flaws, but in the end they had come out stronger. As Batman stood ready to disappear into the shadows once more, Flash called out, "We make a pretty good team." Batman paused, his expression unreadable. "Maybe," he said before turning and vanishing into the darkness. Barry smiled to himself, watching as Gotham's shadowy streets swallowed the dark night. He was back in Central City now, where the light still shone through the dark. And he was ready to keep running, not away from his fears, but toward them.